Okay, nice to meet you, all of you. And we have many teaching in Jordan's house. So it really feels good energy. And obviously, my condolence that passing his journey from this life to next life. And obviously, he had like very long life. So it's really wonderful. So Jordan, you're doing good.
Yes, thank you.
Good. And how are you? All of you doing good? Enjoying summer? And it's a beautiful weather. Not too hot, not too cold. Just next to the Pure Land. Okay. Okay. Anyway, uh, I was in around April. I was in doing some teaching in Spain. And suddenly, one of the main teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, a certain kind of passing nirvana, so get really shocked, kind of is very certain. But anyway, I think from the Dharma point of view, it's basically we need to see kind of this whole thing is, somehow this kind of very uh, ultimate master kind of certain person. From the Dharma point of view, we see as a like of a collective karma. So once we as a collective karma gets kind of reduced or weakening, that kind of like a karmic power, and that's kind of like affects many different levels. So that's kind of like a karmic. It's not blaming for us. It's just like a, you know, that kind of existence and a reality is something interdependent in a karmic point of view. So due to that kind of our and what that really means, our collective virtue karma getting down, what that really means is basically as a collective, our conventional mind gets kind of more kind of leading our kind of following too strong our conventional mind, this gross mind, and then somehow we get where it kind of like impacts into the deeper into our own collective karma. So this is how generally is a kind of processed and understood. Okay. So anyway, at the beginning, it's a little bit shocking. I was driving into the Spain to one center and look at the news, and then kind of like it's real or it's not real, or because these days things are everything need to double check. And then obviously then it was kind of then I need to do some teaching at that place in the center. And then I went to pay my respect and homage to the Rinpoches. Uh, I think he just passed through his clear light meditation. And then there's lots of rituals and prayer process, and particularly Rinpoche's his body. They're going to, what do you call the word?
Embalm.
Embalm. So there's lots of traditional how you handle, there's a prayer sessions and so on. So many things happening. And there's lots of teachers, the Gandhian Tipa, the throne holder of the Giluk tradition, is flew back from South India. There's a lots of teachers coming to do a homage. And so it was not only like Giluk tradition, but also like great all another traditions from Kagyu, from Sakya, from Nyingma, all the great. So Rinpoche is fundamentally Rinpoche as a seeing, as a great practitioner who have a kind of embrace all tradition without losing his own ground. Sometimes we're trying to do embrace whole tradition, and you don't know where's my own ground, where I'm staying which ground. One day I'm here, next day. So I think there's lots of things to learn and witness that, as a practitioner, I think it's very important. You need to ground it. And then based on that ground, then you embrace. Really, like for me, like so much it deepening my own, even just in understanding level to reading tradition, Kagyu tradition, reading Dzogchen tradition. It's like you feel like it's like so much inspiration. So we have to kind of, as a student of, I think we have this kind of rich, very rich treasure that we have a right to exploit and to get blessings. Okay. So anyway, it's a very, really wonderful. And also there's a clear light meditation. What is this? This is a clear light meditation. It's basically all of us have that kind of like a journey. Is kind of map is for us. All of us have that map in our hand, and how much we can utilize that map, it depends for us. So what that really means is basically, from the Buddhist philosophy understanding, is there is this kind of like a primordial foundation, so-called kind of like the main threat from lifetime to lifetime for as a person, as an individual. And that main threat, that main kind of connection, that main kind of track, somehow practitioners, time of that kind of transition time, you really kind of take that journey as not as an ordinary journey, you take that as an extraordinary journey. Basically what that means is that connection, that track, that line have a full potential of awareness. And you're really trying to that awareness transform into the path of compassion, path of wisdom. So that's really, really what you're trying to do. Basically, you have that resource, and that kind of a transition time, it opens up that kind of a window in opportunity, and you take that awareness, that subtle awareness, into the transform into the path. It's just kind of like same thing, like your mind, when you meditate, your mind is busy, then you're bringing back and then gradually transform into the loving kindness. It's pretty much same process what you're trying to do. But in this kind of like, when you're having this kind of like a transition from, this life's, all the sense consciousness, kind of function, kind of like it dissolves, somehow it opens up. So from the Buddhist practice and philosophy point of view, time of a death, so-called death, this word is kind of, we say death, but in a spiritual terminology, it's where we use is entering into the dharma dhatu, the reality of the source. It don't have this word called death. But it have a much more some kind of transitional word rather than kind of seizing. So beautiful. So anyway, so it is and again, it is not just kind of you are taking that ride that opens up that kind of opportunity for all of us. Basically, this is not for me only, for all of us. That opportunity opens up, not necessarily due to our own practice, but to just kind of how that reality is, how the nature it is. just opens up. But some practitioners, seize that opportunity, seize that window of opportunity, and really transform into the path. So that basically, and doing that, so what's the outcome from that? That is I think the shortcut for enlightenment. in a way to see is there is a window of opportunity, shortcut to enlightenment. I think we can say that. I don't know. This is really the basically lots of the more. I mean, like hopefully we don't have to wait for. Basically there's two things. Let me say all the practitioners in Buddhism. I think of course, the motivation is not for self-interest. The motivation is to benefit all sentient beings. To get really full and ultimate strength, they're looking for two windows. One window, while we're alive, can be able to open up that opportunity. Okay, that's the one window. And who will be the example? Traditionally, the example is the Milarepa. He did it while he's alive. Open that window of opportunity and able to get enlightened and to have that kind of like that, transforming that primordial mind to nature of a path. So that's basically, this looks like the main job descriptions of a path to enlightenment. Like really, if you put down what's we're really trying to do is that existence within us, that existence, that consciousness, that subtle consciousness within us to transform, into wisdom, compassion. And then through that, somehow it takes over. When you're able to do that, it takes over entire our own existence. So-called enlightenment that's the kind of like which act, sometimes when you're driving, you say, you go to this place, you take that exit, 125 or something, 122nd or something. So basically, this kind of so-called clear light meditation is basically something that you're taking that exit tools to enlightenment. If you don't take that exit, not able to take that exit to enlightenment, then you go to circle the same highway again and again. To go round and round. That so-called samsara. Okay, so basically what I'm thinking, again, I think there's something karmic way. There's comes in a certain, community or nations. And there's kind of collected karmic kind of bouncing each other and creates potential. Like for example, Buddha Dharma was in India, then somehow karmic condition. And of course, Tibetans, they make very hardship and trying to bring in the Buddha. Somehow there's a karmic conditions way it creates this kind of individual to become awakening. And now somehow, 1960s and 70s, and due to the hippies' kindness, due to the backpackers, and now, there's, I think, karmic conditions to in the West having this kind of opportunity to become an awakening being, like Buddha, something like that. So, what I'm trying to say is, I think, from my personal point of view, maybe there is a hope for Western Dharma practitioner. You can see why I think, because the first noble truth is so vivid in West. So that's really good news, I think. If there's not so much vivid of a first noble truth, then the fourth noble truth doesn't become realistic. Okay, and due to whatever the collected karma, the first noble truth is the blessing for enlightenment. It can be cursed for enlightenment too, both. And so I think so here somehow the first noble truth, suffering of change, and really Dharma practitioners are really looking is a sincere personally and karmically. So I think is collectively, not so much individually, also collectively putting mind into the right direction, right understanding, and then really one I see in my personal feeling, maybe I'm wrong, in the West, sometimes potential to get distracted. There's so much information in Buddhist teaching, and you get somehow kind of caught into the, what you call it, in the water, you have this
Oh,
pool, whirlpool, information pool. And majority of life somehow, you feel like it is a good, it is a virtue, and yes, it's a virtue and justify, and sometimes get that. So I think it's also good, but also not getting too get caught into the information. But I feel generally in the West, the mind is so alert and get like stimulated by that kind of so much information, so much inspiration, and time and energy gets sucked into that. So I would say that's need to be pay attention, you know, and basically fundamentally, I think for spiritual walking, what that means, okay, if you want to do spiritual workout, what you call like physical workout, a spiritual workout, I think there's a first layer is about shine. It's very important. Shine. And shine workout. This is strange. Shine meditation. Shine is I think first, I think we need to see, like a shine, if you want to do shine, I think you have to really know all the kind of like, really understand your mind. If you want to do shine, I think one requirement is really understand your mind. Not only the noisy mind, the loud mind. Sometimes we know the loud mind. Not only the loud mind, we're trying to know your. We are easy to kind of get away from the noisy mind of anger, this kind of noise. But there is another mind, which kind of like what's really running yourself. And shine mind, if you want to do shine, you really know, you have to know these, how you say, what's like those deep state mind, those who runs really yourself. They are not noisy. They are not noticeable. Almost you feel normal. But with shine meditation, I think you have to know that. And particularly in a different type of a concentration they describe, basically comes 5 type of a mind. Topa, Juba. And there's a, Tsorwa. I think there's a 5 different type of mind. Basically, it's also noticeable for us. There's a kind of like a curiosity mind, discerning mind, analyzing mind. This is kind of like this busy kind of movement of mind. So to to really, at the beginning, I think how to balance, we get so kind of like all over because these state of mind are so unbalanced. So Shine meditator is like not jumping immediately what to concentrate, what is my object. No. You can have an object, but really first you are really not so much making emphasis on how to focus, but really knowing your mind and the behavior of your mind. Pretty much in a meditator, you have to have a full, what you call that, portfolio of your mind. What portfolio? Portfolio of your mind. You're able to establish that, knowing the behavior, each of us have a different behavior of our mind. So like really important, that's established. And then really Shine mind is the mind, is a really grounding our mind. It's not so much, then through that kind of grounding, concentration is there is a certain level of, due to the intention and the motivation, you kind of pushed your mind into the object, but the majority part should be a more naturally arising. Otherwise, it cannot be concentration. Hello, good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. So my main thing is Dharma practitioner, Western Dharma practitioners, is you have not so much get, how you say, sometimes I get pulled into the information rabbit hole. I kind of get into that, caught into that rabbit hole. So I think is basically what I'm seeing is then, like kind of not really done any workout. So that's kind of like one thing to pay attention. And you have the information, but also, even you have information, sometimes not necessarily take so literally. And you need to kind of work with your karma, and you need to kind of understand that information depends into your own karma, your situation. So that's also, I think, sometimes you can so literally, and that doesn't really fits with the way karmically where you are, and sometimes it doesn't get. So like informations are not kind of frozen information. Information have a space. When we say information, means basically the teachings. They are not kind of frozen teaching. They have a lot of space that we can work and compromise and kind of like adjust. That's, we have to kind of open up. So, but once we open up for that, the teaching and the information have that potential. So it is not about, that's it, kind of like ultimate truth, and you have, that's it, kind of literally, and you cannot move. It's kind of like a locked. So Buddha's teaching is not kind of like a locked teaching. It is a open space of a growth. Okay. So that's, I think, is one thing. Sometimes you have so much information, and then information sometimes doesn't, you feel like so literally, and then you are not able to work. The information is a live information. It is, you need to work with that. Okay. So what I'm fundamentally, what I'm saying is be aware about not your mind is going through. What, sometimes we're being trying to be aware of what the mind is doing, but really looking its own potentials, and then you need to kind of work how to balance. It's not, yeah, it can go many different directions, and if you need to deal with each directions, it's endless. So really knowing each own, like when you have sees when the scientist, they knows like each matters have its own kind of potentials. That's really important to what you're going to create. So same like for us, it's very important. Each mind have its own kind of potentials and energy, and that's the awareness very important part. Where it is engaging, that's whole different story. But that's I think is sometimes we get too much get mindfulness ways going. It's not so much where it's going, what is its own capability, and then how we can balance. And awareness is almost the potential of a mind itself, behavior of a mind itself, not so much specific narrative, specific object. This whole thing is different things. So mindfulness and all this practice, I think really not so much the object of the mind itself, but the mind itself, not so much the object, whereas the mind is following. Really mindfulness about the mind itself. And then you can really kind of tune and balance. Doesn't matter what the object it is. It can go in same object. Once you're well tuned, the mind function doesn't matter wherever you can go. It's not so much the faults, it's not so much the faults of the object, it is an imbalance of the subject mind itself. So really to live your life mindfully, I think it's not so much too much avoiding the object, it's really trimming up the subject mind itself. And that's it. I think the mindfulness have to be into the mind itself. Okay. So anyway, what I'm trying to tell you over here is, in a way, Buddha's teaching is complex, complicated. In a way, it is a very simple. Basically, basically, working with the material that exists within our own self is nothing have to go to library and trying to find the material. The material is within our own self and working with that in so simple. And in a way, it's so simple. Okay. So for us, I think it's important is to finding simplicity and kindness. Again, I think sometimes, particularly in the West, maybe strongly capability to kind of retreat back from information world and get into the much more into the mindfulness mind. But another area need to work is compassion. Sometimes Dharma practitioners, you are engaging a doer, but then it becomes too strong. So again, not losing that kindness element. What that really means, kindness element, is kind of like being nice to yourself. What that really means, I will say, absence of aggression, absence of absence of a self-judgmental. I would say that will be naturally opens, kind, there will be naturally kind of openness towards yourself when you have an absence. You're not kind of getting into the self-critical. I mean, like, again, this area is also kind of not easy, clear cut, I think. We as a human being, we need to push the limit. We want to push our limit. And that kind of our pushing our own limit is requires self-evaluation. Self-evaluation requires self-analytical. And that kind of whole process we can able to implement, but how we can do with that with a kind of kindness. So that's the whole area need to be developed. We need to pay attention. I think we can be very good at pushing our own self-limit and self-analyzing, and like a kind of like a self-assessing, in even a spiritual path, we can be good, but it becomes kind of like instead of much, how you say, instead of exciting to move forward, rather than coming much more disappointment of how I'm. So in that whole area, if you look at it, I feel it is a much more the state of analytical awareness when it's focused more towards what is wrong. Then we may fall into the judgmental self-critic. And when we have a kind of a balanced awareness, where when kind of like a wrong, and where it can do better, or your one session, you have a very lousy session, and off session, you just kind of, okay, let me see what's going on. And you really kind of analyze, and you see, oh, the kind of more hope nature. I can do this way. You see much more light in the process of the self-analyzing and analysis process. You see more light, and that's the, sometimes difficult to seeing the light and the gentleness or uplifting. You feel much more into kind of discouragement. So again, somehow how to kind of shift the focus. The focus have a balanced awareness, kind of what need to be transformed, where need to be transformed. Then once you have that clear picture, and then you have a much more looking your awareness towards to the brighter side. And once we are able to do that, then I think so-called kindness self-evaluation, kindness self-analysis. Yeah, I think accepting what went wrong and inspired where we can transform. I think that would be like a really wonderful. So anyway, what I'm trying to tell here is not all the time beating our own self. Oh, why are you going wrong? It's great. So in a spiritual journey, I think this. So fundamentally, there is a Buddha's teaching called Dene Deordo, joyful path to joy. Joyful path to joyful path. Joyful path to joyful path doesn't mean there's no problem at all. There's a plenty First Noble Truth. And the joyful path maybe require one of the key ingredients is the truth of suffering. But then the observer, through that truth of suffering, they brought lots of inspiration, and you can kind of feed your spiritual life through inspiration. Feed your, and like a constantly kind of inspired. Yes, what I can, kind of, full, energized. So anyway, what I'm trying to say over here is, in a Dhamma practitioner in the West, one important part is if you're able to feed through inspiration, I think that's what I'm trying to say. That's very important. Like you can push your limits. You are very smart. You are diligent, but too harsh. And to avoid that, really trying to make a full conscious decision to be able to feed your spiritual journey through inspiration, not to kind of, I want to fix all the problem. Don't fix your problem. Truth of suffering is important. Truth of suffering is important. How we bounce to liberation is how much we swim into the truth of suffering, I think. So it is it's a whole mindset, how you're going to. So I think the Buddhism, the one thing Buddha's teaching is one thing unique is there is a source of energy we can pull out through truth of suffering. And And, sometimes I think like, we are in this big university of samsara. We are enrolled and we are accepted. Big university. And the graduation takes lifetime. Graduation takes long until we get liberation. We get graduate. So anyway, and this university basically study three major topic: suffering of suffering, suffering of change, or progressive suffering. Basically, these three things you I to call it when you go to university. What's your major? And in Buddha's teaching, they're supposed to be a major in all pervasive suffering. Once you're able to get really major, what's the major? Major, all pervasive suffering. So anyway, so what I'm saying is not think truth of the Four Noble Truth is not kind of four sliced phenomena. Four Noble Truth is one big soup. All they are mixed together. You don't think like, okay, I'll slice that one out. Sometimes it has that flavor. But I think in the reality, they all are like a four element. The four element are this all, we have a four element. They are all working together. They are not like four slices things. And, they all works for our survival. Same thing. All our own Four Noble Truth is the way it makes the liberation. It's not that First Noble Truth is the absolute obstacle for our liberation. You cannot think that. It's like a four element, exactly. It's like they're all working. We need to collaborate how to get the best thing about all of those noble truths, which is exist. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is that as a Dhamma practitioner in the West, that kindness element, that gentleness element, and then slowly, I think once you have that, then slowly your motivation becomes sincere bodhicitta motivation. Because sometimes I feel we're working another way. We work bodhicitta motivation first. Of course, traditional ways explain like that. And you work, and then the actual practice comes up, then they have lots of kind of pressuring and torturing. And I think maybe to train into the bodhicitta motivation, maybe first in that actual practice element, you need to do lots of kindness and gentleness, and then maybe you are fully qualified to meditate in a motivation, bodhicitta motivation. And then I think it's because may become more kind of like maybe we need to work another way. Maybe bodhicitta becomes dedication part at the beginning, but maybe then through the working through in the actual your practice, you have this kind of like a kindness. Not, sometimes we go all mother sentient being, yes, into the verse they have all mother sentient being. In a reality, maybe in our own session, maybe being kind to our own self. Let's start with that one. But the prayer says all mother sentient being, and then you kind of save all mother sentient being, and then even we are not able to kind for our own self. So again, so I think the kindness element, and then I think in the West there can be something really kind of revere mastery. For lots of Dharma teacher who came to Tibet from India, one fundamental quality, kindness. Not so smart, there's lots of smart and information. You can have this teaching, that teaching. That really make an impact in the society. Change that kindness. The teacher, the master, the quality of kindness. And that's really, I think, make a strong impact into Tibet. Also, for example, Lama Tsongkhapa. he have a two main disciple. At the beginning, these two disciples, his rival scholar, really wants to challenge. It's like they're scholars, and it's like same thing. Like the of course Tsongkhapa has his own brightness and that's whole things. Plus, fundamentally, he able to really taint his two main disciples through his kindness. That's kind of his. So I think is something needs to becomes this kind of like a sun shining, like it's a unconditional. And then karmically you have this kind of wisdom element. Very good. And you really need to work for the lojong and kindness. And then through that you can have a really good spiritual leader, spiritual guidance. So anyway, and then through that you can inspire, sometimes, you feel, maybe Tibetan also felt at the beginning, I'm not Indian, so I cannot get enlightened. Only Indian people can get enlightened. Now in the West, I think like only Tibetan get enlightened. And I'm Western, so that kind of like a strange, maybe it's a reflection from laziness, like to excuse, to justify why I'm not enlightened. Something you need immediate justification for ego. Ego says, take this one. You will be passed why you're not enlightened. And for Tibetan, they say, you're not Indian, you're not from Nalanda, you're not from Bihar, Bodh Gaya area. Okay, you're not enlightened. And that kind of gives you justification. Okay. Some kind of like I be perfect to relax you while you're not enlightened. So I think so I think it's a really important to something study-wise, information-wise. I think it's, particularly Tibetan Buddhism can provide you infinite, but don't get into that rabbit hole. What I'm saying is, you get, I have one friend, he's a Korean Zen practitioner. First came in a meditation class. And one day we talked and he said, Tibetan Buddhism looks like a supermarket. There's so many different cheese, different. And then I said, that's good what you're seeing, but still you just stick with your practice. And then he will come. Then in the meditation class, we add a little bit more and more. Then he said, I think I should come to philosophy class. So he slowly came to philosophy. So anyway, I don't know, I help him or I make his meditation worse. So I think it's a naturally in the West tendency for fall into information. Is I think something, I'm not saying like don't study, but I think study by 5% and meditate 10%. And I think in the result, maybe that would be better. Maybe it can be a little bit boring. You feel like, I need stimulation. I need something stimulating. I need to get busy. Sometimes, it's not to kill the time. Sometimes you can kill your time through virtue karma. Sometimes I call like white collar spiritual crime. What that means is a white collar spiritual crime is like you're doing many things, but you're not really into it. Reading and really you haven't sink into it. So I think it is not rushing. Again, another I think karmic obscuration in Dharma practice is this kind of rush. This is, I think, kind of like a karmic obscuration because the world, surrounding world is so fast moving. I think there's something in the spiritual, maybe, you feel like I did this for already 1 month. Can I have another practice? It's not like a lunch or breakfast. I have this same breakfast 1 week. Can I have another breakfast? To treat our meditation as like a medicine, I think it's really important. Should not treat as like our diet or food or breakfast or lunch. Yes, maybe, we can get boring to having the same thing every day. But we can have the affliction same time every day, never get boring. So I think it's important that one thing I think is we need to see as a medicine. That's, I think, is really important. I think what that really means is you are connecting your limitation and your spiritual practice. You're not just keeping busy. You can keep busy without connecting our own limitation, and you can be busy. You can kill the time. You can justify as a spiritual practice is wonderful, but our own karmic weakness, the target was not hit, even having pushed 1 inch. So I think your practice we need to see as a medicine. So that means we need to, how we see our practice, we need to recognize what my limitations are, what my weaknesses are. And so therefore, I think it's a really requires self-assessment, not general assessment. Sometimes we do self-assessments very general. That I think is not enough, little bit deeper and detailed. And also when we say I'm lack of inspiration, I'm not inspired. And I think inspiration can come from a little bit more deeper, assessment. Okay. So that's so seeing our own meditation practice as a medicine. So medicine you take until you cure. So we need to see that kind of reality. It's not about now I want to do something different. It's not about clothes. Clothes, yeah, you're bored wearing the same thing. I want to change. Okay, fine. But the Dharma practice, Dharma as a medicine. So really making, when you say I want to do when you feel like I want to do meditation, I want to do meditation. What meditation should I do? What practice should I do? For example, that's a strange question. I think it's a strange question because, like, when you see doctor, you can say, doctor, what kind of medicine I take? Without self-assessment. So same thing, if you ask what practice I should do, I think it's a strange question because you need to really, if you have motivation to practice, motivation to meditation, you need to find something where is something within the myself. That's very important. And then you can have a consultation with your own teacher and get a little bit more deeper and then organize, strategize, plan. And then, it's pretty much same like a doctor. In a doctor, when the hospital, then there's a chart. This is our goal, where we want to go. This is the plan, how we're going to reach that. And exactly same thing. We have to have a plan. Our meditation practice, we have to have a plan. Sometimes I feel Tibetan Buddhism is really good into the resource, but really bad in the planning. There's no good plan. It's very general. It also doesn't emphasize into the plan. I think Lamrim is some kind of like a general plan, but I think you have to have lots of. When I say plan, that means working with the individual karma. We all are different. Yeah, we all are different. We are same, yes, in a way also different. Can't become different. So it's a require some kind of individual attention and adjust and work exactly like a doctor. Doctor cannot prescribe 100 medicine for 100,000 people simultaneously. Individually need to be seen and examined. And maybe it might give the same medicine, but it requires that kind of individual attention. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is fundamentally, again, feeling of rushed. I need to get that done, finished. That kind of like, the world is so much run based on a deadline. You have a deadline, this deadline, that we are bombarded with a deadline. You have to finish this one. And then we take that kind of like a pressure in a spiritual journey. The spiritual journey is kind of interesting. I think, there's no deadline. Sometimes, you read sometimes, somehow implicitly put some kind of deadline. But anyway, so basically, self-assessment in a spiritual practice. Self-reflection and self-assessment, but having some plan out of that reflection, having some plan, some kind of simple things. Even you just take a walk, even simple things, you need to dedicate some level of action towards to that reflection. I think it's a really, then there can be many different things: mindfulness, trail walk, mindfulness of a dog walk, taking your dog. There's many different ways to integrate it. There's many different ways to integrate it. Okay, anyway. So what I'm saying is basically in the Dharma practitioner in West, generally, collectively, I think you pay attention. I think the wisdom element, I think is really good. I think generally speaking, on the method element, there's a kindness and patience. I think it's really important. Once you have these two qualities, built up a spiritual journey, and I think it's really wonderful, and it can inspire very infinite. So need to have a lots of kind of sometimes this is a danger. I think what I'm talking is as an individual, how you manage practice and the information, the study. And basically what I'm saying, practice and the study. Basically, at the end, what I'm telling is your practice and your study. If you overly get distracted in study, that's also not good. If you're overly distracted getting into the practice and never trying to kind of get it deepening, so something balance. Somehow we need to find individually, be aware in your own spiritual journey. Now, sometimes maybe we feel like we have no time, and spiritual practice is all about mind. If we don't have a mind, then of course we lost the opportunity to practice. But until we have a mind, wherever we are, in job situation, and your own meditation cushion situation, wherever, until mind is there, I think we have a time to practice that. I think this is, one thing important. Sometimes misunderstanding of a Dharma practice means we have to kind of like into the cushion. I think this is one thing. I think this is important to Dharma practice. Means I have to have an altar, I have a cushion, one gong, and like that kind of like a setting. Is this really Dharma practice? Dharma practice. We need only one thing to practice Dharma, is truth of suffering. Dharma practice exists in this universe because of the truth of suffering. Not the rest of everything is not mandatory things. It is there, okay, good. So I think one thing is, again, we need to know what is a Dharma practice. Dharma practice is all about the mind. And mind can be in a meditation cushion, mind can be in your cubic office, the mind can be the, wherever mind it is, there's a Dharma practice. So this is, I think, one important into the West. Many practitioners feel, I have no time for that. Maybe main Dharma practice is happening in the office. Main Dharma practice of opportunities in your office, where there's more people, where there is like a collective truth of suffering. That's maybe your improvement of a spiritual realization might happen there than in your one single truth of suffering and your environment with. So this is, I think, a misconception or that kind of thinking. So the whole thing you prepare for where there is a collective truth of suffering. Able to have mindfulness, able to have a compassion. That's it. I think, really that's, if your mind able to stay concentrate, peace, calm, compassion, this is all about. Okay. So in a way, your daily Dharma, even like one morning when you have time, let's like a weekend retreat. Weekend retreat I think, unfortunately, weekend retreat, we say, to run away from the truth of suffering. Maybe, hopefully, weekend retreat becomes to how to face from Monday through Friday, the truth of suffering. Usually we say, I'm so tired of truth of suffering, so I'll have weekend retreat. Maybe if we train that weekend retreat, yes, maybe 20% from kind of that thing. And the rest of the energy is, okay, I'll do this weekend retreat where I can be spiritually vibrant Monday through Friday. And maybe training into that way. Maybe the Shanti Devas, engaging Bodhisattva's way of life. Bodhisattva's way of life. Bodhisattva's way of getting employed, working, anyway. I think that's fundamentally one misperception. I don't have time to practice that. This needs to, so three things: compassion and kindness into the spiritual path. And patience, the world is so fast, getting that kind of like, I need to do different, I need to, that kind of rushness in the spiritual path, pay attention. And having no time to practice the Dharma. Is this misperception or deceptions? It really need to be correct. I think once we correct these three things, readjust, I think it's it's a really important. There's one Kadamba master, one great practitioner, and before he joined to kind of like a more spiritual life, his life is he's like bandit, go on horse and rob people. His life is kind of, and based on that kind of truth of suffering that he's seen, and he kind of like wants to change. And the change. So he wants to change. So he told to, basically, long story short, he told to one of the another his peers, and peers, because he's really changed. And the society notices his change. Society is trying to see him here as like a spiritual guidance. So one of the peers asked him like, "Oh, you must doing lots of kind of advanced this and that." And he said, "No." So basically, because of my previous the early life experience. So basically, I'm just keeping mindfulness into my body, speech, and mind. That's it. Just being aware. That's my main thing. I'm not doing something that advanced and complicate things. So basically, his existence, his life, he's trying to see through the lens of the mindfulness. So anyway, what I'm saying is, so these things are in the West, maybe in the Dharma practice, we should like somehow pay attention and kind of like get more kind of like a stronger way to see the Dharma practice. Okay, and then like to once you're able to kind of graduate from the working with this distracted mind, then can be possibility you can have a kind of like a mystical experience. It's a whole different world. We have this kind of world based on this kind of awareness. Common reality sees things and how we function. That's it. Okay. Not because of the house of outside reality, how the collective awareness kind of decides it. And we just function into that kind of like a kind of same altitude of a consciousness awareness. Okay. But then, once as an individual cross beyond that or go deeper awareness, the reality experience can be different, maybe contradicts. Maybe people think you are strange. You are not normal. Possibilities, these things. And then, it's all kind of your lens are changing. Your lens are changing, and the reality how you perceive is changing. And your behavior may not switch with how the lens before what you are using. Again, that's fine. Okay. And so there can be, because of the lens, the consciousness is changing, transforming. Where you perceive the reality can be different. Where you read the reality, where you decide the reality. In our common consciousness, we decided reality based on logic and reasons. Somehow, where you kind of put in the different categories is a logic and reason, and that kind of common share how you make a decisions. Now, when it comes down to the next level of consciousness, not necessarily you use that kind of tool to mind to get into the conclusion. It use different tool. It may come into a kind of like unconventional conclusion. So that's also okay. Okay. So sometimes those kind of like, so what happens is sometimes in a Shinya meditation, people do long meditation, they have a kind of glimpse of kind of different experience. And I think it's kind of time to time, it kind of like a dip into the different lens of awareness, and you have a different world experience. So reality is not fixed. Reality is interdependent into the awareness way it is. So basically, we as an individual person, we are not locked into this conventional awareness. We are not locked into this. Our consciousness, have a capability to zigzag into the subtle consciousness, back to gross consciousness. Okay, so So fundamentally, you know, okay, anyway, so my key thing is, collectively, Dharma in the West, few things to pay attention, but then there's a strong potential, what I'm basically trying to say. Okay. Okay. And this now sometime now like for example the chapter into the patient chapter, it talks lots about anger and the anger and the frustration and obviously I'm trying to recall myself how I feel anger. I definitely have experienced anger, but I don't able to recall anger. Anger. How you describe anger? Like feeling anger. Okay, hand gesture, maybe like that. What will be the emotional gesture? Anger. Huh? Emotional gesture will be heat.
Tightness.
Tightness. Okay. Frustration. 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 Tight.
Unkind speech.
Huh?
Unkind speech. Unkind speech.
Yes. Oh, yes. Unkind speech. That's kind of like the symptoms, no? Unkind speech is symptoms. Frustration is a symptom or actual anger. So we need to kind of see which is the symptom, and maybe everything is a symptom. The narrowing of the mind. Narrowing. Can we get more specific? Narrow the mind. What is anger? Maybe there's no way to point. This is the anger, but we feel lots of this. Explosion. What is the anger? Anger is like a bunch of, like bundle of, like pack.
Rejection and pushing away.
Is the symptoms of anger? Then is this 1 point? Okay. Okay, go ahead. Exactly. Focus. Okay. Good. So there is what is the anger? Anger is all this, maybe the focus. What do you think? That's
Focus on yourself.
now the question comes, focus, now when you look into the anger, is the focus into the self or focus into the other? Where is that? Also combo. Huh? Other. Okay. Now, anger is a really nature of a strong focus. Because the focus is very addictive. Okay, that makes sense. And the focus is for other. I think there's still space to push. It looks like focusing is the other. maybe we need to take one step back. Do you think there is something angers?
Dualistic, self and other. Now it's that separation.
One of the ingredients is separation, yes, but now we're looking for specific. Anger is explosion, frustration, or maybe these are symptoms. Anger is focused for negative towards to one person or other. Is that a symptom? Or there's something behind this, one step behind this, there's maybe anger is, where is it hiding, basically? Huh? Sadness. What do you think? Anger and sadness comes together or not?
Fear.
When we're experiencing anger, there's no fear, no? What do you think? While we're experiencing anger, there's no fear.
Something.
Fear.
Yes.
So,
Step by step.
so fear looks like an environment. There's lots of fear. And that's the kind of feeding ground for the anger. Okay. Now we're looking, what is the anger? Is anger is a frustration? Maybe that's the symptoms of anger. There's the anger is a focus in something. You're locked into something. Okay, that looks like I think it's getting close. Is that the really anger, or this the kind of like the title of the anger? You have a page in a book, you have the title of the book. Is that locked, focused, kind of pointing? Is maybe the title of the book is not whole book. So again, this is an open way to look at the anger. Is that kind of focus is coming from where? That kind of focus coming from. So ego comes down to what I think, what I believe, what I think. Okay, self-righteousness. Okay, perfect. Self-righteousness. So if we really, really look into the anger, is a self-right. What you is the so now we're coming kind of trying to is the focus for another one is that kind of is that's the anger, or anger is like a 50% focus and a 50% self-righteousness, because we make a combo like kind of like 50-50. There's no anger we can say it's a 50-50. It's a 50% is a focus for that they are wrong, they did it, and the 50 is my own how I see myself. It's like a 50-50. What do you think? Half and half.
Microsecond minds shifting it. There is really no anger. It's just a series of mind moments that are mind maybe starts out in fear and then visual consciousness at an object and reaction and
it's like a hurricane. You have many different elements coming, but there is something that keeps that hurricane, that eye of the hurricane, or whatever you call. So here, yes, all these another elements is there, but really is arising the energy from self-righteous and that blame they are wrong. So what is anger? Anger is a combination of these two. Maybe anger, maybe the word anger, we say anger, I'm angry, is maybe symptom. We're talking about the symptoms. Symptoms, anger is a symptoms of self-righteousness. So the reason I'm talking this is that basically the more we kind of trace back, looking into it, maybe there's more window to, okay, how I can correct. That's the main key thing when we kind of trace back. So if the anger is a majority, is a self-righteousness, and the way to working with the anger, maybe we need to way to perceive the self and self-forgiveness, and maybe that's the way to find it. If the anger is 99% of they are wrong, then I think it's a little complicated. There's other involvement. When the anger is the way we understand anger is majority of my own kind of existence, the perceptions of myself and all that things, then there's more window to where to work. I think maybe in a perception in the world, because we see anger is 99% that focus, they are wrong, and difficult to fix that problem because how to change these people, you cannot change. So I think misunderstanding of anger maybe becomes a complicated problem. Creates more job for therapies.
If you don't have a concrete sense, you as an independent existence, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So I think from the Buddhist Lojong teaching and everything comes down because we get lots of time waste into the symptoms, working with the symptoms. Of course, symptoms is a important kind of hint which kind of flavor is coming from. I think it's important to pay attention. And if we work so much giving pay attention to the symptoms, I think that's the problem. So we as an individual person, I think really kind of, there is a way to kind of balance that imbalance of emotion. Way to balance is not so much that focus, but that self-grasping. Maybe how to work with the anger. Maybe we have to work with our own self. I want to work with my anger. It's not I want to fix everybody. Everybody the same. There's no way to everybody become same, think same, do same. There's no way to do that. I think everything that the what you call the dial tone, how we perceive our own self. Okay, so now over here, I think this is really important for us. Lots of our own personal problem, lots of our psychological problem, challenge. Okay, maybe this is an important exercise in the Dharma, how we kind of find a right amount of a dose of a self-grasping, but not overdose with the self-grasping. Okay, now maybe it's whole practice, the fundamental practice, the practice of a wisdom and practice of a compassion, maybe ultimately arise from one who is able to balance the self-grasping. Maybe it's fundamentally, maybe it comes down there. And somehow once we're able to get that our hands on, the rest of the conditions, fear and everything, it can transform. They cannot able to pollute. So maybe this is really how we work with the self-grasp. Maybe this is most important that no matter how much, we need to figure out finding, if we want to help for somebody, maybe we need to find the help from that angle. If we want to help our own self, maybe we need to find from that angle how to balance self-grasping. Is a complex. I think if we for our level, if we drop, we see absolute negative, then where the motivation comes, where's the driven energy comes. So finding that balance, self-grasping, finding the self-grasping. We need to find really good therapy for this one, finding the self-grasping. Finding, self-grasping is not ultimately wrong. It becomes kind of like a challenge when it becomes an imbalance. Maybe self-grasping, the self-awareness or self-grasping is maybe it is what really makes us to move forward. It's important. Maybe self-grasping, even the sutras teaching this is self-grasping is the cause for enlightenment. So it is a cause to enlightenment, it is a cause for our life, it's a cause for our spiritual path. So self-grasping, not necessarily see. So we need to find more language, more method to working with the so-called self-grasping, grasping. Grasping have already a little bit negative word. What do you think? Grasping.
Can you jump over self-grasping by being curious about the other? And if you're curious, then you have to be curious here. There's a flavor, you have to care.
Mm-hmm.
So formulating a question. I mean, I see anger as gas, explosive gas, many types. Some burn hot, some burn cold. But I can be the lighter, or I throw away the lighter, open the door, let the gas out. How I do that is by curiosity.
Now, again, I think the shifting attention from self to other, I feel maybe it can give some kind of relief for temporarily, but the self-grasping will make more gas. Again, you will find that because I think the gas is coming from that self-grasping and the conditioned fear and everything, and then ready to burn. So I think again, it's not only one method. We have to have a shifting attention from self to another, can give some space, but ultimately for us to knowing until we doesn't really face self-grasp, until we need to somehow, otherwise in kind of avoiding condition, constantly trying to avoid, you can get some kind of peace. So again, this we need to kind of look at it. We're looking like what is the anger? And anger's, when we snapshot, we feel like it's frustration, is it this and that. Then we push more further, it becomes more kind of like a one single focus kind of negative mind towards something. And then again, we push that, comes down to the self-righteous. So when you push back, so now if we want to kind of work with that, if we work with the frustration, it doesn't really solve the problem. If we just work with the focus itself for that kind of negative focus, only itself, not necessarily can work. It ultimately it required to work with the self-righteousness. And that's like ways comes like once we're able to work the self-righteousness, and then it can really kind of soften the focus, it can relieve the frustration also. Okay, so now how, and the self-righteousness and how this will work with this one, what will be, how, kind of like a general help for our spiritual path, in a general help as a being, as a human being, general help way to developing compassion, how we work with it. Self, I think this becomes a really, self-grasping, it is so behind, but it is also in the front, how we see the self. Okay.
Grasping is just about trying to get a hold on something, trying to get yourself comfortable, trying to get ground when things are ultimately groundless and impermanent. Isn't it just like so Isn't that anger about that? Is you just can't stand the fact of impermanence? I mean, the fundamental reality of impermanence. I know that's something the Buddhist thing. You constantly want to believe, oh, that's true. When in fact it's an emanation of its appearance, but it's not all true. You're really trying to get a hold on something that isn't there. Is that what anger is about?
Kind of like a maintenance of the anger. Yes, they're like grasping. Is that it keeps maintenance. Mhm. Mm.
But in my experience, anger is not always bad because you may have not necessarily self-righteousness, but a sense of righteousness. You see something happen to other people. And that actually can be very successful.
Mhm.
You pull some relief
Mhm.
because of that.
Okay. I think it's a perfect situation what you're saying, but the proposal for this situation, sometimes they say you can do the same thing and make it different without anger. So this is the proposal, Bodhisattva's way of life is like that. There's a proposal because when we're coming through, not self-righteous, but the righteousness, it's somehow, it's some level of a pollution is bringing. So proposal is, can we do, so there is some kind of like a, how to, in a Buddhist philosophy, it talks like a different time sets of motivation. Sometimes there's like philosophical terminology, causal motivation at the time. What happens in such a case, at the beginner, righteousness is there, and there is a causal motivation can become righteousness. And the training is a motivation at the time, let's train into the compassion. So it's like there's a kind of like a two layers due to the kind of habit, righteousness motivation can kick up. Now through the process, intentionally, you kind of turning that energy into a compassion, and then you're working towards to the change and the better. So then of course, then forever there's no righteousness. The entire causal motivation and motivation at the time, both becoming compassion. So it was in the philosophy, sometimes we discuss causal motivation can be anger, and the motivation at the time, right before the action, is intentionally kind of create compassion and then engaging into the action. Sometimes they will advise doing that. So I would say, yes, righteousness sometimes. Now, again, here, kind of like when you look at back to Buddhist philosophy, it will say like our perceptions, either self as a truly existence or rest of the universe truly existence. So, and these two kind of perceptions of reality is really what really sets the tone of our emotion and consciousness. Okay. So there's a lot of meditation to like, not so much working with how those another emotions are working, this kind of like self and phenomenon. They call like emptiness of self and emptiness of phenomenon. So once we kind of work with that one, and somehow it sets again perceptions of reality kind of change differently. So again, like for example, maybe in the example that you mentioned, is I think it might have a collaboration of a self-grasping, but it have a much more kind of like a take initiative by grasping of a phenomenon. And so somehow still there is a kind of like a combination of grasping of self and grasping of a phenomenon. Somehow, maybe philosophically, I will say that kind of righteousness happens. That righteousness comes. What is I heard there was righteousness. What's the definition of righteousness? Mhm.
And I'm righteous. Because I'm completely right, and mine is the right side, and it's more than just being right. It's like
Can we say that I'm righteous? No, don't say that. Okay. Insulting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think righteousness is different from self-righteousness.
and you're proud of it. So
That's self-righteous.
Okay. So righteousness and self-righteousness are synonym. No.
I think that it's pretty easy to collapse between one and the other. But in the classic sense, a righteous man is a person who attempts to do good.
Really?
Not for themselves,
Okay.
but because that is the right thing to do.
Okay.
Good point. With a conviction.
With the conviction.
Yeah, it stems from having some sense of, in a classical sense, morality.
Mhm.
That there are things that are good and there are things that are not constructive or bad.
Mhm.
And that you act in a way to try to make things good.
Okay.
And a truly righteous person would be one who actions towards good are pretty automatic,
Mhm.
pretty natural.
Mhm.
Fine. This is
Great. Yeah, righteous.
like it has true meaning.
Mhm.
Either way. But because it so easily spills into I'm right and you're wrong,
Mhm.
it has a connotation of being self-righteous
It's
pretty
okay.
easily.
Okay, so I think what means self-grasping? I think we need to, that's whole area, what that means. We use this kind of terminology, self-grasp. What is this? In the experience of a self-grasping from Buddhist philosophical point of view, there's two layers. What you call like I'm just kind of translating literally, okay, imputed self-grasping and innate self-grasping. Okay, there's use two things. And imputed self-grasping is a much more like a conversational. It is much more like, you have something and somebody says no, and then there's a kind of, it kind of awakes based on something disagreement, how you feel. More, I think the self-righteous maybe play important role to the imputed grasping of self. Okay. And when we're reading in the Buddhist teaching in the wisdom element, it wasn't seen too serious, this one. This kind of like a self-grasping created through, like they call innate grasping mind, considered as a kind of like the sleeping cell. It's more danger. The innate grasping mind.
It's like hunger.
So like what that really means, innate grasping mind, it is a not clear right and wrong. It have a flavor of so there's lots of, like, for example, so-called meditation of emptiness is a lots of time you spend in the understanding of innate grasping self. And in a specific meditation, you really kind of the imputed grasping are so clear cut. Like feel it. It kind of comes to it kind of awakening through different beliefs and things like that. It's kind of vivid. But the behind that innate grasping, which is again kind of like an imputed grasping, kind of comes through the situation and your belief systems and your values and things like that. But okay, where that comes from, the question comes. This is called this kind of undercurrent, kind of innate grasping self. And basically, there's a lots of kind of observation takes what that really means. And it basically error, mistake in the perception is not so much mistake in the emotion. It's just ultimately it comes down to the error in the perception of the self. That's it. There's no clearly pointing this is right or this is wrong. In a imputed grasping self have a clearly different perspective. No, you are overreacting. They can be pointed many different ways to saying, I was overreacting, or I wasn't. There's many ways to look at it. But the imputed, the innate grasping self is basically the meditator. They work into the seeing, kind of like a truly for yourself, error of a perception of self. Error of perceptions of self. So that's I think the verbalized. I think this is how we can. It's just kind of just some kind of innocent mystic of a perception of self. Innocent mystic is nobody to blame. Innocent mystic of a perception of self. Who did it is just habit. It inherited from previous, from Buddhist point of view, is it inherited from beginningless time, nobody to blame. Kind of this air to perception of self. Somehow, this is the way the apple get wrong. This is the way the whole, the concept of a samsara and a nirvana came. Somehow, why we get mistake in the perception of self? That question can be asked. I think I'm not sure why we get mistake in the perception of self.
So you're just getting at more and more subtle forms of delusion. Is that the context? I mean, I've never heard of Nate. I've never heard this before.
It is not so much delusion. Delusions, all these are symptoms. So fundamentally, all we can.
That's more gross.
These whole things are symptoms, and that symptoms these symptoms are coming from air of a perception of self. That's the ways where they kind of trace back, okay, in an innate grasping self. We call it innate grasping self, and I think that this kind of like a meditation of emptiness is all about, I think, fundamentally kind of how to work. Even we can ask, what is the air? What's the mistake? If we ask one more question, the air is somehow innocently perceiving self as a true existence. Nobody to blame. You inherited that kind of, you perceive self as an inherent. So again, what that really means, self as inherent, basically we believe there is something self to point. There is something kind of like a soul, or there's something there. So that's the really the meaning of inherent. Inherent. This is something you feel in here, in your heart. You know. So that's the really from the so again so from Buddhist point of view, they blame everything to that one. That feeling is something there. Okay. So so now maybe the important meditation of emptiness. Now, there's nothing there. I think it is a nihilistic. There's nothing there. Okay. There's a something. There's a something like a just like a picture, digital picture, collection of pixels. And you zoom in, the pictures disappear. Zoom out, there's a high resolution picture, almost going to talk to you. Okay. And when you zoom in, you cannot see the picture, but there is a picture somewhere into the pixel. It's just zoom. You just kind of zoom in. You only see. So you zoom out. So it is. You cannot say there's no picture when you zoom in because you're only seeing the pixels. So self, I think, when we say unity grasping, that kind of is a kind of high resolution, zoom out. What is the picture of self is coming in. So the teaching of emptiness is basically try zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. It dissolves the picture. Zoom out. So I think the message is it is a not fixed reality. This digital picture, high resolution picture, is created through cause and condition of a bunch of pixels together created this kind of things. It is a not inherent locked reality. So now, there's so much problem created through this picture. So much different world wars, social problems. In reality, we can also zoom in and that picture can disappear. So I think the wisdom teaching is basically a little bit kind of taking out the kind of rug underneath and saying, yeah, we can look in same place, same area, zoom in, picture is gone, only you see the conditions. And I think this is the main exercise, dissolving the fixed reality of self. So this is, I think, the wisdom. And we need to find, one of the things, we need to find some kind of therapeutic exercise to work with that kind of, because I think can be helpful to really some kind of tool. Okay, this happens, I need to do this, zoom in and out. I need to zoom in and out. I need to zoom in and out. I'm not trying to only zoom in and stay there, because then you have nothing. Only pixels, only conditions. No, you need to go in and out. You like a breathing, like exhaling and inhaling. And wisdom perceptions of a self is zoom in and out. You see the conventional reality created by cause and condition. Then you also see just only the conditions. Not there's a kind of like a pointing, this is that. So I think this is like somehow we need to find bringing this in a forefront and making exercise. This is, I think, Nagarjuna's Buddha's Panjara is one suggestion. We need to put in a test.
Well, there's some kindness. You have to be kind. If you go and look at the specific causes and then you're not kind to yourself at that point, then you're going to go into hot hell, right? So you want to see you're human, you're flawed, you see the causes, and pull away. I want to change the picture as I pull away, but I want to be kind to myself.
There's one literature that talks about just by seeing the reality in that way, collected by cause and condition. When you look at very detail, kind of zoom in, is also just kind of like just energy flow, and you have a kind of full picture. And once you see this in one literature text, and you see like naturally compassion arising, your compassion that you don't have to kind of like see the conditions, kind of like naturally compassion arise in something that's is described that kind of thing. Then once you have that kind of like a world view of self, view of the world, it's like compassion is kind of natural, and also like even in this literature it says cause and effect, karmic cause and effect, so much natural. It's so much. It gives in this literature, it kind of like unlock many things once you're able to come through that angle, the view of the world. It unlocks so many things. It's much more like a natural experience, compassion, natural. So that's kind of like not so much you go through reflection and kind of like floods of compassion naturally. Okay. Okay, well, take it. Yeah, stop here.
Sure, do short dedication.
Short dedication.
Okay. On page 30. Due to this merit, may we attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, rise in growth. May that born heavenly but increase forward.
Thank you. Thank you.